I made a pretty funny build that can deal a pretty funny amount of damage and can deal a lot of damage and completely delete Calpus. So, let's get started. I personally love greatswords, and there's two really good ones out there right now. The Atlantic Greatsword, which as you just saw, it deals bleeding, and the Colossal Greatsword dropped by Evander, found in the Bronze Sea, and it's a warlord weapon, and it has its own unique skill, Colossal Cleave, which is pretty cool. The thing is, I would have to change my class to do this, and I kind of didn't want to because I was kind of committed to going warrior, but if I were to say which one would be more fun, I had to try warlord for the first time. So I went ahead and bought a tempered scroll because for this specific build, I was kind of just thinking of just going glass cannon. I also went ahead and bought the Colossal Greatsword for 20,000, which was much more than it needed to be. If you check the prices now, they're like 10,000. And the interesting thing about the Colossal Greatsword is that it's actually, if you have the tempered scroll with it, it is the highest damage stat weapon in the entire game. And so this would fit well with my glass cannon playthrough, which is what this playthrough is all about. I'm going glass cannon. I'm going to deal an insane amount of damage while being as healthy as a toothpick. And finally, I'm going to be using my one stat reset that you get from your first time opening a new save slot. And for this, I'm going warlord, specifically 120 strength and 160 weapons. So I'm gonna get shot on my fighting style while also focusing mostly on my weapons, being able to use other stuff, and something like Sparrow Thrust on a warlord, which actually that's kind of cool. Now, since I was prioritizing damage, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go Iron Leg Warlord. Even though I hate Iron Leg and it's stupidly slow, I'm gonna go Warlord with Iron Leg because it should deal the most damage. And I was wrong about this because in a couple of very recent actually, updates, Iron Leg now deals the exact same damage as basic combat. Even though it does deal bleeding, the starting damage, the initial damage is still the same. I didn't know that at the time, so I went ahead and just, customized my weapon, the Colossal Greatsword. I put Colossal Cleave as my first skill, Flying Slash as my second, Flash Strike as my third, and Whirlwind as my fourth. And then I went ahead and got my Dodge Reflex, which resets if you do, reset your Awakening. And Iron Leg was way too slow, so I switched it to Exopolis, which is the one that weapons use, and it's much faster. And then I used my first skill on this, and our starting damage is 409 on our Flying Slash. We're going to be trying to increase that over time, and yeah, so that's what I went ahead and started doing. I first went ahead and just started testing the damage on Architect Merlot, the boss, mini-boss, and I was actually pretty surprised by how fast I was able to delete him. And so I was pretty happy with this, but I could tell this was incredibly slow. The Colossal Greatsword with Tempered has a speed of 0.75 stat, so it is incredibly slow. And at this moment, again, I didn't know the amount of damage, but basically the only reason you would want to use this, like Iron Leg, on Warlord, is just for that extra bleed, where you get tier 2 bleed because, you have weapons and you have Iron Leg, so you're dealing double bleed, so that would, it would give you tier 2 bleed, which would deal more damage over time, but I don't want that. I want to deal as much initial damage as possible. And Iron Leg makes your weapon slower, as well as it gives you slightly more size, but again, that trade-off of speed is just not good at all. And this was the slowness of this. A Colossal Greatsword being really slow, with Iron Leg Imbue being also really slow, they both combined to become just the slowest thing ever, and I was just getting destroyed again and again. Even though, of course, my build was, you know, the build that I showed in like that one build video about not caring about stats. Yeah, energy regen sucks. So having to use Musgrave lights for energy regen, it made literally no difference. As well as like not having the stats also made a big difference. So I was wrong about that one. Make sure you have stats. I had to really, you know, lock in this fight to even win it, but after this I also lost a couple more times, and this build just sucked. So I had to make a new build, a more glass cannon build, a more damaging build. I then changed from Iron Leg to basic combat, and then just figuring out that wow, it is like they deal the exact same damage, but basic combat is way faster. So I started to use that, as well as I started to use Candelaria gems, thinking they would be useful. Hint, they weren't. This wasn't my final build at all, but you know, I just wanted to show you guys my process of figuring out what build I wanted to go with this. And with this point, I had finally reached a damage of a 754, around 700 on my flying slash. Now, at this point, I was kind of reaching, you know, as when you reach a certain point in stats, you get diminishing returns. It becomes really expensive to get that tiny bit more stats just for a damage increase of about 50 or 60. And yeah, I was already starting to see it in this state. But already with this build, by changing to basic combat, fighting was so much more faster, so much more easier. I was actually able to aim properly and, you know, actually do stuff in fights. But I wasn't happy with the damage I was dealing. I wanted more. I also tested, you know, dual flintlocks, and my goodness, I already deal above 1.2k damage with them. Uncharged, they deal about, what, 6 times 150? That's 900 damage uncharged. And charged, they deal 1.2k with the current build, and that's pretty good. But again, I wanted to deal once with my flying slash around 1000 damage, and so I made a business decision. I went ahead and bought around 4 powerful scrolls. That's like a lot of money, which I then used to make this build right here, with, mind you, a a blasted piercing amulet, which I had bought beforehand. But now, with that build, I was able to deal around 850 damage, which was pretty good, but still wasn't enough. We're gonna go off script for a bit, okay? I was trying to commit some war crimes on some new players, and it backfired. Quite literally. Anyways, if that wasn't possible, then we shall do it with mind games. I then tried to, you know, had an opportunity to do some serious war crimes. But first, I wanted to make sure I was being fair to this guy, so I sent him a bit of money. Then, as you can see in the chat, we're trying to figure out how to turn off auto-translate. We planted the bomb. And then, surprisingly, the person asking for it didn't fall for it, but his friend did. The oldest trick in the book succeeded, and it was so funny just to hear just the cargo just fall down into the water. It was just amazing. Don't worry, after this I paid the guy that lost all of his cargo. It was genuinely so funny. Anyways, let's go back into making questionable business decisions. I bought a blasted power amulet. Not only was it blasted, it was a powerful blasted power amulet. I mean, it was a deal, okay? I didn't have to pay 30,000 galleons. Oh my god. This was not worth it. The thing was worth it though, like buying a powerful blasted power amulet was a good deal because usually they go around for around like, you know, the power amulets themselves, blasted ones, go for around 150,000, and this one was around 162,000 with powerful. So I didn't have to go ahead and buy like a powerful scroll separately for like 25,000. Instead, I just bought this and got, you know, a powerful blasted power amulet straight away. I then used this in my build, and with a bit more of an optimal build, I got 896 damage. Now, the highest damage that I could deal with this build was about 906, with a bit more of like, you know, like min-maxing. But was it worth it? Heck no. It was not worth it. That powerful amulet, powerful blasted power amulet, you gotta get the name right, wasn't worth it at all. So I immediately sold it back. So with that out of the way, I then tried, you know, using different fighting styles. Cannon Fist was actually, it is the highest damage fighting style if you use the fighting style itself, but imbued, it is one of the worst ones. So this wasn't it. And something like boxing was much faster, it was much nicer to play with it, but it dealt less damage, around like 150 less damage overall. So it also wasn't worth it at all from what I was trying to get, but it was much faster. And if I were to choose between boxing and fighting in PvP, I mean boxing and basic fighting style, I would choose boxing for PvP. It's actually much faster, and also you get that TP dodge reflex, so it's just worth it. But in the end, basic combat prevails as the highest damage imbued and overall just, you know, overall best fighting style for what I was trying to get in terms of just pure damage. And also here's a shot of me getting hunted for no reason again. I could tell he was gonna hunt me from just looking at him going to the poster, and I was the only person there, so I was prepared for this one. And to be honest, do I wish I was a bit faster with this? Yes. Do I wish I had attack speed? Yes. But did I do a whole lot of damage from just one move? Yes. And did my moves also just not hit or work sometimes? Also yes. I don't know why. It's probably because you know, Colossal Greatsword has you know, with it having tempered, it has 0.96 size, which even though that shouldn't really matter, it actually somehow does a lot. So no, it had to work with it. And I think this might be the most damage that you can actually deal as a warlord. So that's a cool thing to know. But there is a new move coming soon in full release that might help us reach that 1k damage threshold.